Stephen A. Smith, this dude's always been controversial. Stephen A. has always had this ability to say absolutely ridiculous things while commanding the attention of the mainstream media. For the longest time, Stephen A. was deemed to be untouchable. He was the biggest star at ESPN. Hell, he was the only star at ESPN. Matter of fact, he is one of the only stars in sports media that found a way to cross over into the mainstream. There is a big difference between being a star and being an attraction. Colin Cowherd is a star. My girlfriend never heard of Colin Cowherd. Mina Kimes is a star. No one cares, though, about Mina Kimes. Rachel Nichols is a very big name in NBA media, but if you're not a die-hard fan of the NBA, you're probably never heard of Rachel Nichols. All three of those are stars, but none of them are attractions. None of them move the needle. They don't have the ability to draw a big audience on television. Have you ever wondered why ESPN has never given Mina Kimes her own show? She's not an attraction. She's not a draw. Stephen A. Smith, though, he is. For the longest time, Stephen A. Smith became bigger than ESPN. He had all the leverage in their relationship. Their relationship wasn't balanced. Stephen A. had all the power. But over the last couple of months, the balance of power in the relationship between the worldwide leader in woke and Stephen A. Smith, that balance of power has started to shift in the other direction. And I think we're starting to see the result. I think we're beginning to see the toll that it's taking on Stephen A. Smith. I have been telling you guys for 2 years now that Stephen A. Smith was preparing to leave ESPN. Well, KC, Dan Le Batard said the same thing on his show this morning. Yeah, well, I'm glad Dan LB put down the woke wiener and finally came to this realization, but we have been calling Stephen A.'s departure from ESPN here on the channel since the summer of 2021. It is one thing to break up with someone, and this is especially true for men. It's one thing to break up with someone and feel like you have all the power, you're making the decision. It's one thing to break up with someone when you feel like they still need you. You feel like you're moving on to bigger and better things and you're leaving them behind. But it's another thing altogether when you're laying the foundation for the breakup and all of a sudden you come to the realization that they no longer need you and they're thinking the same thing. Over the past 2 months, we have seen this increased level of bitterness coming out of Stephen A. Smith. This dude continues to express his anger publicly. Stephen A. seems very bitter, very, very bitter. Now, on the surface, it doesn't make any sense. Ratings for First Take increased dramatically. If you believe Stephen A., we have the #1 show on television. No, you have the #1 show in your genre, but you only have one other competitor. You can only be in first place or last place. Stephen A. is making millions of dollars every year. He's crossed over into the mainstream pop culture. He wrote a best-selling book, and to his credit, it is the best autobiography that I've ever read. I gained a newfound respect for Stephen A. Smith after I read his book. I highly, highly recommend it. Trust me, it is nothing like the Book of Mythical Racism that Jamel Hill released last year. The publishing company, they printed 500 copies thinking that Smelly Jameli would have no problem selling that small amount. My inside sources tell me the publisher, they ended up throwing away 495 copies. The other 5, they weren't sold. They were given away by Jamel Hill during her media tour. But Stephen A., he has all these reasons to be happy, but he seems to be absolutely miserable. He spent the entire month of September attacking Skip Bayless. He seemed to be proud that he was able to be the rebound relationship after Skip divorced Shannon Sharp. Hey, it's me, Shay Shay. He was constantly bragging about woke take, dominating undisputedly woke in the ratings. That would be like the NBA bragging about beating the WNBA in the ratings. You don't brag when you're supposed to win. The favorite never brags. The favorites, they let their records speak for themselves. You know who talks shit? The underdog. It seemed like Stephen A. Smith was on this mission to destroy the credibility of Skip Bayless. He was pissed off because Skip had the audacity to divorce Shay Shay. I can't believe the white man will push my brother out of a job. Now, this was hypocrisy at its finest because Stephen A. Smith, he did the exact same thing to Max Kellerman. Now, speaking of Max Kellerman, he was another consistent target of Stephen A. Smith last month. To my knowledge, neither Skip Bayless or Max Kellerman has ever publicly responded to Stephen A. Smith and all of his attacks. But Marcellus Wiley did. Marcellus Wiley, this is my dude. I got a lot of respect for Marcellus Wiley because he's not afraid to call it like it is. He said on his podcast that Stephen A. Smith no longer wanted to work with Max Kellerman because Max Kellerman was smarter than Stephen A. He said that he was scared of the intellect of Max Kellerman. Where have I heard that theory before? Oh yeah, right here on this channel. Max Kellerman is a brilliant dude. He is smarter than Stephen A. Smith, but intelligence doesn't equal entertainment. The problem with Max Kellerman, he doesn't know how to relate to an audience. He doesn't know how to be entertaining. Last week on The Breakfast Club, Stephen A. Smith, he responded to Marcellus Wiley. This is outright defiance. I would never, ever, ever say that another black man is afraid of the intelligence of the white man. Once again, what the hell does race have to do with this? Why would you be so bothered by this comment? Why would you take it so personally? Unless you know it's true and you are viewing everything through the prism of race. Which leads me to Jason Whitlock. You know, I don't know what to think of Jason Whitlock lately. Sometimes I find myself agreeing with him. He often makes very good points, but I feel like Jason Whitlock is an intentional shit starter. This dude has worked at just about every major sports media company in America, and in many cases, he burns bridges when he leaves. I remember about a year or two ago, he worked with Clay Travis at Outkick for maybe a month, maybe 2 months. Didn't leave on great terms. Recently, Jason Whitlock, he has been highly critical of Deion Sanders, which is fine. That's fine, but he takes it to the extreme. He's going after Deion Sanders every single day. He attacks Deion Sanders so often that it almost seems inauthentic. Seems like Jason Whitlock's only attacking Deion Sanders for clicks and views. Now, with that being said, I do like him. I have no problem with Jason Whitlock. However, it seems like Stephen A. Smith does. Yesterday, Jason Whitlock became the latest target of Stephen A. Smith's bitterness. Supposedly, fans were begging Stephen A. to address Jason Whitlock, but I ain't buying it. I think he did this because he thought Jason Whitlock would respond, because he damn sure ain't getting the response that he desires from Skip Bayless or Max Kellerman. Listen to what he says about Jason Whitlock. Roll the film.
There's one particular person who will remain nameless, and I will not deny it. I think he's a fat, no-good bastard who I despise to the core. I'm where I'm at. That particular individual is where he's at. And no, I'm not talking about Marcellus Wiley again. No, I'm not talking about my former colleague on First Take. No, I'm not talking about them. They ain't fat bastards who are seeds of the devil, wishing nothing but black folks harm.
First of all, we all know who you're talking about, so there's absolutely no sense at playing this game of shit fuckery by refusing to name Jason Whitlock. Just be a man and come out and say it. I'm talking about Jason Whitlock. Stephen A. Smith, he made sure to publicize that he was not talking about Max Kellerman or Skip Bayless or Marcellus Wiley. You know why he had to do that? Because he has been arguing with so many people lately, he had to make sure that his audience knew exactly who he was talking about. There were two comments in this diatribe that really caught my attention. And no, it wasn't the fat bastard remark. Was that a low blow? Sure, but Jason Whitlock, he goes after plenty of people, and if you're going to do that, you have to expect comments like this in return. It's fair game. The first comment that caught my attention was Stephen A. Smith saying that he despised Jason Whitlock to the core. He's basically telling you he hates Jason Whitlock. You know what it takes to hate someone? Anger and bitterness, misery. There are a lot of people that we discuss here on the channel that I don't really like. Keith Olbermann, Joy Reid, Jamel Hill, the dump divers in the WNBA, Bob Griner, Megan Rapinoe. But how many times have you heard me say that I despise them? I'll answer that question for you. None. It's never happened. Why? I'm just not an angry person. I wake up every morning in a great mood. There is nothing that Joy Reid can say that's going to make me despise her. Now, the second remark that caught my attention was Stephen A. Smith claiming that Jason Whitlock is the seed of the devil. Now, I am kind of guilty of this. I have called both Keith Olbermann and Joy Reid evil in the past, but let's be honest, they are. But the reasoning behind Stephen A. Smith saying this was what I found interesting. He believes that Jason Whitlock is the seed of the devil. He believes that he is evil because Jason Whitlock criticizes black public figures. Doesn't Stephen A. Smith do the same thing? Wasn't he just criticizing James Harden for how he's conducted himself in Philadelphia? Another thing, Stephen A. claimed that he was on this level and Jason Whitlock was down here on this level. If that's really the case, why are you even acknowledging him? Why are you giving him free publicity on your platform? I'll tell you what I think is really going on here, and my stance on this has not changed. Same thing I said last month after ratings were released for the first couple of weeks of First Take with Shannon Sharpe. I think Stephen A. Smith is starting to realize that he is no longer the man at ESPN. He is no longer the biggest star. Just think about it. They bring in Pat McAfee. They pay him significantly more money than they're paying Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. personally brings in Shannon Sharpe. He shapes this narrative that I'm saving my brother's career. What happens? When Shannon Sharpe is on First Take, they're drawing 7, sometimes 800,000 viewers. When it's just Stephen A. Smith, they're drawing 400,000. Shannon Sharpe, he is going to be filling in for Stephen A. Smith tomorrow morning. Just going to be him. Welcome to Club Shay Shay. What happens if Shay draws 800,000 viewers without Stephen A. Smith? What happens then? All of these things combined, they create seeds of jealousy. They create seeds of doubt. Do not be surprised when tension starts to develop between Shay and A. Stephen A. is running out of targets here. He is running out of people to attack. Do not be surprised if Shannon Sharpe is next. Stephen A.'s contract with ESPN, it expires next year. Now, his podcast and YouTube channel, they are doing well, but it is nowhere near the same size platform that he gets from ESPN. I still think he wants to leave, but he's going to hear them out. He is going to negotiate, and he's going to demand more money from ESPN. The problem for Stephen A. Smith, ESPN no longer has a reason to give it to him. This time last year, ESPN desperately needed Stephen A. Smith, but that is no longer the case. I think we are getting to the point where Shannon Sharpe is actually the draw on First Take. I think all these things combined are the reason that we are seeing this constant bitterness from Stephen A. Smith. He's coming to the realization that he's just not as big of a draw as he thought he was. What do you think? Have you noticed this increased level of bitterness from Stephen A. Smith? Why do you think that's the case? Is he beginning to realize that he no longer has the leverage in his relationship with ESPN? You let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. I appreciate you guys and your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow.